Yeah, very good afternoon, everyone. I'm Diwakar Yadav, Mutual Fund Product Manager from HDFC Securities. First of all, I would like to thank all the participants for taking out the time and joining the webinar on market outlook and fund update. So, in today's volatile market, getting insights directly from the fund manager is always a privilege. Okay, in today's webinar, we will gain insights on market and detailed overview of Baroda BNP Paribas Large Cap Fund. And to discuss this, today we have Mr. Jitendra Sriram with us. He is a senior fund manager with Baroda BNP Paribas AMC. He's having 27 years of experience in investment segment. Prior to this, he worked with Prabhudas Leeladhar Portfolio Management Services, Max Life Insurance Company, HSBC Securities and Capital Market, and HSBC Asset Management Company. Pleasure to have you here, sir. And over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Diwakar ji, and thank you very much for giving me this platform of HDFC Securities and to address your clients. And a very warm welcome to all of your viewers today. So what we will do is we'll quickly start with our thoughts on markets. I have a few slides that I'll just focus on, and then we will also shortly touch upon our large cap product. So firstly, if I were to look at markets from an overall point of view, there are probably about a couple of elements that go in. Let's start with some of the basic features. First is growth. So, whatever reason it be that last year we had a little softer growth because of electoral code of conduct and voting dynamics, little slower government capex as a result, and all that. So the base is slightly more amenable in the sense that it is thoda soft tha, it was a little anemic. And us base pay, we should be able to grow at a fairly reasonable clip going forward this year. So growth is not so much a worry, and also you have to put it in the context कि globally आप जब देख रहे हैं कि IMF is toning down global growth forecast by 30-40 basis points and all that, उसके सामने India's growth is likely to improve. So to an extent, relative terms, we are looking little better on the growth aspect. So a positive magnitude we can say कि 19-20 है, but it is fairly reasonable that we are a growing market as such. Second आता है आपका monetary policy, and ever since December, change of guard and all these things that happened, we have seen a very sharp tilt in RBI stance towards the market. So सबसे पहले ये हुआ कि आपका एक तरह से liquidity infusion हुआ, open market operations हुए, CRR cuts आए, rate cuts आए, change of stance आया. So जो system एक तरह से deficit था to almost about 1% of NDTL has become surplus to the tune of nearly a likewise amount, 1% of net demand in term liabilities and all that. So to an extent, what has happened is that you have a situation where market में आपका जो sovereign yields थे या overnight yields थे, सब कुछ तकरीबन 70 to 80-85 bips हर जगह correction भी आ गया है थोड़ा. So it has been a material swing factor. So if I were to look at the last 3-4 months in totality, मुझे लगता है कि the biggest swing factor has been RBI's change of stance. तो एक तरह से जो भी हम लोगों ने पिछले 4-5 महीने में जो लो बनाया था 21,500 के आसपास का जो लो बना था बाजार में, I think we are probably, that is in our rear view mirror, we have probably crossed that. So in markets we never say never, कल को पता नहीं कल को कुछ कहीं पे कुछ न्यूक्लियर ब्लास्ट हो जाए या कुछ हो जाए, but I would say that broadly I would say from a fundamental standpoint मुझे नहीं लगता कि we are probably going to test those levels going forward. So that is one part. We can debate about the upside and I'll come to that also. तीसरा रहा आपका flow picture. आप सबने पेपर्स में पढ़ा होगा अक्टूबर नवंबर में you had almost about 2 lakh crores of FII selling coming through in October November. Huge amount of paper supply भी आ रहा था उस टाइम पे. तो as a result what had happened is it created a pressure on the secondary market. तो मार्केट जो एक हाई बनाया था 26,500 के आसपास का, उधर से करेक्ट होते होते नीचे भी आया. So there are a couple of things that happened from a flow perspective. September में आपका एक तो the US elections got over, so you had because of the new government's policies there, you had a lot of dollar strength. तो उसके वजह से पैसा emerging market से निकल के developed markets की तरफ गया. तो वो एक pressure था selling का. Second, China had also announced a 5% stimulus. और आप इसको इस कंपैरिजन में डालिए कि दिस इज द सेकंड बिगेस्ट स्टिमुलस एवर अनाउंस्ड बाय चाइना. दैट टू एन एक्सटेंट आपका जो लास्ट बड़ा स्टिमुलस था वो ग्लोबल फाइनेंशियल क्राइसिस के टाइम पे हुआ था, जो कि तकरीबन 8% ऑफ जीडीपी था. उसके सामने अभी आपका 5% आया. तो जो भी आदमी जितना भी नेगेटिव था या अंडरवेट था चाइना में, उतना थोड़ा बहुत तो कम हुआ होगा। तो एक तरह से विद इन इमर्जिंग मार्केट्स ऑल्सो पैसा इंडिया से निकल के बाहर चाइना की तरफ गया। सो दैट वाज पिक्चर वी हैड। मार्च से अभी आप जब अभी तक देखेंगे तो थोड़ा बहुत ग्रेजुअली फ्लो मोर बैलेंस हो गया। डोमेस्टिक फ्लो तो आप सबको पता ही है कि काफी स्ट्रांग रहा है, एंड एफआईआई साइड में थोड़ा सा सेलिंग अबेट हुआ है। तो एज अ रिजल्ट द फ्लो पिक्चर इज आल्सो एट द मार्जिन टर्निंग पॉजिटिव। सो नेट में वी आर सीइंग अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ इंक्रीज्ड इंस्टीट्यूशनल इंटरेस्ट कमिंग इनटू मार्केट। फिर आते हैं क्वेश्चन ऑफ वैल्यूएशंस पे। तो एक तरह से अगर हम सितंबर अक्टूबर में देखेंगे वैल्यूएशंस, तो टिपिकली हम लोग ऑलमोस्ट 20-22% प्रीमियम टू एमएससीआई ईएम ट्रेड कर रहे थे, इमर्जिंग मार्केट इंडेक्स जो था। वहां से दो तीन चीजें हुई। एक तो आपका मार्केट ही प्राइस वाइज करेक्ट हुआ, तो थोड़ा सा वैल्यूएशन उसके वजह से भी सस्ता हो गया। दूसरा एक और चीज ये हुआ कि मार्केट टिपिकली नवंबर दिसंबर के आसपास रोल फॉरवर्ड करती है। मार्च 25 के सामने लोग मार्च 26 की तरफ देखने लगते हैं। आप जो भी ग्रोथ पकड़ी हो उसमें 7%, 8%, 10%, जो भी पकड़ लीजिए, आपका उसके वजह से भी थोड़ा बहुत पी रेशियो कंप्रेस होता है। तो उसके ये दोनों फैक्टर्स मिला के आपके वैल्यूएशन थोड़े बहुत और बेटर होने लग गए। सो दैट इज ऑन द वैल्यूएशन परस्पेक्टिव ऑल्सो। जो हमारा एक तरह से प्रीमियम था, या आप दूसरी तरह से बोलेंगे कि जितना फ्रॉथ था बाजार में, वो थोड़ा कम होके वो एक मोर रीजनेबल लेवल तक आ गया, एंड वी करेक्टेड ऑलमोस्ट अबाउट 10-12% प्रीमियम ओवर इमर्जिंग मार्केट इंडेक्स, विच इज टिपिकली द लॉन्ग रेंज हम लोग जो एंजॉय करते हैं। इंडिया क्योंकि एक थोड़ा हाई पी मार्केट हमेशा रहता है, क्योंकि उसमें आरओई भी बेटर है और अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ भी टिपिकली बेटर रही है, तो उसकी वजह से हमेशा हम एक 10-10% प्रीमियम पे ट्रेड करते हैं। तो वैल्यूएशन इज नॉट अ नेगेटिव। सो आई वुड से दीज फोर फैक्टर्स, विच इज ग्रोथ, मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी, आपका फ्लो पिक्चर और वैल्यूएशन, ये ठीक है। Now we come to one factor where I would have been personally a little happier with more, which is the aspect of earnings growth. तो एक जो चीज ये है कि बिकॉज ऑफ द स्लो डाउन ऑफ लास्ट ईयर, अभी तक अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ उस लेवल पे नहीं आई है जहां पे हम लोग बहुत मतलब एक्साइट हो जाएं। क्योंकि अभी आप देखेंगे तो अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ लगभग लगभग हाई सिंगल डिजिट पे आ रही है, 7 से 10% के आसपास। होपफुली इट शुड इम्प्रूव, बिकॉज इस साल आपका इकोनॉमी भी ग्रो हो रहा है, उसके अलावा आपका ब्याज की दरें कम हो रही है, तो होपफुली इट शुड ग्रो। द फोरकास्ट इज ऑफ मिड टीन काइंड ऑफ अ ग्रोथ। Hopefully we should achieve that, but अभी तक वो नंबर आया नहीं है. It is an expectation. It is not yet a delivered thing. So we are hopeful that it should come through, because as जैसे जैसे monetary policy transmit होता है economy में, उसका फायदा दिखना चाहिए. So those are aspects that I would say on the, if I say four positives, one little more neutral, I would say I would have been happier with a little stronger growth. वो अभी तक आया नहीं. Then we come to some of the tactical factors that are impacting markets. Tactical, I say, because these are not deeply fundamentally rooted. But one is obviously the case of Mr. Trump and his tariffs, which has been a worrying point for markets overall. तो इसमें आर बेसिक थॉट प्रोसेस जो अभी तक जो इम्पैक्ट आ रहा है, जैसे आप टेक्सटाइल्स बोले या मेरीन एक्सपोर्ट्स बोले, या फिर समथिंग एल्स लाइक सम पार्ट्स ऑफ इलेक्ट्रिकल इक्विपमेंट वगैरह, इनमें फ्रैंकली दीज आर नॉट लार्ज पार्ट्स ऑफ द मार्केट। सो निफ्टी 50 या एनएससी 100 में आप देखेंगे इनका वेटेज ना के बराबर है। सो इट डजेंट रियली मैटर कि कुछ ड्यूटी उधर लग जाए, बिकॉज इससे ठीक है, वैसे इकोनॉमी में छोटा हल्का फुल्का फर्क पड़ सकता है, बट इट इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी अ मटेरियल इम्पैक्ट फॉर मार्केट्स. Having said that, let us look at the two big areas which can potentially impact markets, because these are two large exporting sectors. One is IT services, one is pharmaceuticals. आईटी सर्विसेज में जहां तक बात करेंगे, जैसे आप सवेरे उठते हैं तो आप एक अपना व्हाट्सएप खोलते हैं, ऑफिस जाते हैं आप अपना एमएस ऑफिस खोलते हैं, उसके बाद आप गूगल सर्च खोलते हैं या आउटलुक खोलते हैं, जो भी ऑल आर अमेरिकन सॉफ्टवेयर. टिपिकली आज तक आप देखेंगे तो यूएस इज ट्रेडिशनली केप्ट सर्विसेज आउट ऑफ द एम्बेट ऑफ टैरिफ्स एंड ऑल दैट. मुझे नहीं लगता इसमें टैरिफ आएगा, बिकॉज इट ऑल्सो रेसिप्रोकल इफेक्ट से किसी और कंट्री ने भी लगाया तो उनको भी फर्क पड़ेगा, तो इसलिए मुझे नहीं लगता इसमें बहुत बड़ा टैरिफ आने वाला है. हालांकि ये जरूर हो सकता है कि देर आर टू वेज टू प्ले अ ट्रेड, विच इज टू इधर डू द कैरेट अप्रोच और द स्टिक अप्रोच. सो स्टिक इज द टैरिफ कि आप एक टैरिफ लगा दो, कैरेट ये है कि आप इंसेंटिव दे दो. तो देर कुड बी अदर सॉफ्टर इश्यूज, लाइक अगर आप यूएस में फैसिलिटी लगाओगे तो आपको कम टैक्सेशन दरें मिलेंगी, या जो भी है वो सब हो सकता है. सो सी फ्रॉम अ from a market perspective and being a market person, I would say it doesn't really bother me क्योंकि अगर Infosys ने अपना अगला प्लांट यूएस में लगाया, टीसीएस ने अपना अगला सॉफ्टवेयर डेवलपमेंट सेंटर यूएस में लगाया, तो उससे मेरे को कुछ खास फर्क नहीं पड़ता, so that so long as the earnings growth is coming in. So I would say that it will mean where you spend the next dollar will change marginally, but it is not going to be a material impact as such for me as such. So that is on the tech side. Now we come to pharmaceuticals. Pharmaceuticals में अगर आप देखें तो there are a couple of stats that I just want to highlight here. Number one is the fact that 47 or 46% of generic drugs made in the US is made out of India. So to an extent, what has happened is that India is a genuinely a large supplier. और typically क्या होता है अगर आप भाव बढ़ाओगे generics का by way of tariffs, it is, see, US is largely a medically insured market. तो Medicare, Medicaid ये सब रहता है, तो इंश्योरर की कॉस्ट बढ़ती है. इंश्योरर भी वैसे चुपचाप बैठने वाला है नहीं, उसकी कॉस्ट बढ़ेगी तो ओवर अ कोर्स ऑफ टाइम ही इज गोइंग टू पास इट ऑन टू हिज कंज्यूमर्स. तो एंड ऑफ द डे इट विल लीड टू हायर कंज्यूमर medical premia as well. So to an extent, there has been a little bit of reluctance to raise tariffs. See, छोटी मोटी tariff आ सकती है 5 से 10% जो भी, which is not going to be a material factor for Indian pharma because हर हर साल 5 से 6% की वैसे ही जेनरिक प्राइस में इरोजन होती है. एक साल वो नहीं होगा, टैरिफ आ जाएगा. So to an extent, I'm not so worried on the generic pharma industry per se. What the administration in the US has done is they are more attacking the innovative drugs. They are saying that US is the largest market for pharmaceuticals, and it is surprising that US enjoys or is suffering from higher prices compared to the OECD 30 economies. So to an extent, जैसे 30 of the wealthiest economies जैसे यूरोजोन हुआ या जापान हुआ, उनसे भी higher tariffs US market में, which is illogical. It should be at least the lowest of the OECD 30s. To an extent, their focus is on innovator markets. So I don't think you're going to see too much of an action. वहां पे भी एक तरह का carrot stick आ सकता है कि instead of having a large tariff, you could induce people to set up plants in the US कि मैं आपको 15% टैक्स का दर दूंगा या ये दूंगा. See, most of the larger Indian pharma names, अगर आप डॉक्टर रेड्डीज ले लें या सिप्ला ले लें या सन फार्मा ले लें या डिवीज ले लें या ऑरबिंदो ले लें, लुपिन, all these people have facilities in the US. So I don't think it is going to be a material delta as such for pharmaceutical as well. So that is on the pharma side as well. So that broadly covers what I had to speak on the Trump tariff. Then one other aspect is the Indo-Pak conflict of late. And when we are speaking of conflicts, obviously, some of you will be interested in what happened in Iran, Israel, and all that yesterday. So let's just take it. See, India Pak hopefully is something behind us in a sense that its ceasefire is announced. Hopefully, there'll be no further provocation and all that. Only one part I would say is that we need to be watching out for. See, there will be a temporarily a stock up. जैसे आप आपने जाके आपके एक इन्वेंट्री ऑफ मिसाइल्स थी, इन्वेंट्री ऑफ ड्रोन्स थी या जो भी था, काफी कुछ खर्चा हुआ होगा when you had that 1 week of battle with in our northwestern border. So you need to restock up temporarily. There might be elevated purchases. It could also mean by corollary कि थोड़ा बहुत आपका defense budget बढ़ सकता है. And if government is very keen to meet its fiscal deficit target, there could be a little shave off on other areas like roads or railways or power or something like that. So थोड़ा बहुत tweaking हो सकता है उधर, which is possible. थोड़ा बहुत ammunition even RBI ने दे दिया with a bonanza dividend also. So maybe they can manage with that. We don't know the exact numbers. But to an extent, some part can come from there, some part can be funded out of some shuffling from here and there. So I don't think it's going to be a very material figure for India in a sense of that restocking issues. Second is also the complexion of war has changed. जो आपने देखा होगा जैसे no field forces crossed the border. All that happened was, you only had missiles firing from here and there. You had drones, anti-drones, anti-missiles, and all that. It's become very electronics dominated. So you may see how the spending is shaping up in future might be very different from how it was in the past. उसका implications हो सकता है कि what kind of companies you go forward and back. So that I think is a more stock specific call when one has to take. But that is where I would leave the Indo-Pak situation at. Now, when we come to the situation of Israel and Iran, see, obviously, one near term worry is that crude has spiked to the early 70s handle. So to an extent, from where it was a couple of months back in the 60s handle, it has moved up, and which obviously causes a little bit of pain to India because India is a net energy importer. तो उसका थोड़ा बहुत फर्क पड़ेगा, but do realize that India is modeling its crude purchase and its budget at about $90. उधर से अभी के लिए सस्ता ही है वो. So magnitude कितना सस्ता था वो शायद थोड़ा कम हो गया, but थोड़ा benefit हमारा कम हो गया, but it is still a benefit nevertheless. The second factor is, what do we feel on crude? Because that is the biggest implication. See, one part which I really can't answer is what is going to be the implication on the Straits of Hormuz, because that dictates almost 30% of crude gas movement across from the Middle East into European markets and all that. So to an extent, if there is a continued, unrest there in that market, potentially you could see longer sea routes to reach Europe. आपको Cape of Good Hope से अफ्रीका के अराउंड घूम के जाना पड़ेगा, तो to an extent वहां से shipping tariffs बढ़ती हैं, टाइम जो लगता है वो बढ़ता है. All this will cause its own share of issues. So ये सब कॉस्ट फाइनली कंज्यूमर पे आती है, तो वो टू एन एक्सटेंट दैट विल गो अप. सो वो एक चीज है. बट इन टर्म्स ऑफ रॉ सप्लाई, what I feel is that whatever is Iran's export surplus can be easily compensated largely by Saudi Arabia and Qatar in terms of ramp up. So मेरे ख्याल से डिमांड सप्लाई पे बहुत ज्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, even if Iran is impacted. But shipping routes, rerouting can be an impact. One needs to be careful about that. So that broadly covers what I had to say on the market. I'll just point to a few key slides, which, because I have covered most of it. So this is something that we broadly plot on the market in terms of across the capitalization curve. The way to read this chart is like this. आप सबसे left वाला बार देखेंगे ना, पिछले 7 साल में the high point of P for large cap was about 32 times. The low point was about 18 and a half times, where the 10-year, the 7-year median was about 24 times, and currently we are also around 24 times. Large cap is largely in a comfortable zone. Now, I will move to the mid cap and I'll also highlight one other factor here. आप लार्ज कैप का जो स्पेस देख रहे हैं ना, या एम्पलीट्यूड ऑफ द वेव देख रहे हैं बिटवीन मिनिमम एंड मैक्सिमम, वो छोटा है. So it is not very reliant on earnings growth to actually filter through. When you look at mid cap, the amplitude of the wave is high, which means high point was 53, low point was 17, median was 36. Currently we are at 36 and median was 34. हम लोग मीडियन से थोड़ा अधिक है, बट मोर इंपॉर्टेंट द एम्पलीट्यूड ऑफ द वेव इज ऑल्सो हाई, विच मीन्स दैट यू कुड हैव अ सिचुएशन कि अगर अर्निंग्स ग्रोथ नहीं आई तो ये वैल्यूएशन टेबल थोड़ी सी कंप्रेस हो सकती है, विच इज द अदर पॉइंट आई वांटेड टू लीव यू विद. इट इज मोर डिपेंडेंट ऑन अर्निंग ग्रोथ. When you look at small cap, we are right now slightly higher than the median. So mid cap and small cap in general term, you may see a phase of consolidation near term. आज के आज, I will answer that part about whether we can hit a new high. I think it looks a little difficult in the next 3 months because there is obviously the issues that, earnings growth उतनी strong momentum के साथ आई नहीं है. But do realize that around October, November of this year, you will have a situation and market will do another rollover from March 26 to 27. We could look at that point being a point where market might really take that to break out of this range. But near term के लिए थोड़ा सा तकलीफ लग रहा है because you might see a little bit of consolidation. See, markets में you can never be definitive. कल को India has a very lucrative trade deal with Trump in the next month. You might see a reversal of all this. But from whatever information we have now, I would say that we might see a little bit more sideways movement at this point of time. So that's where we are positioned. We like the large cap space because amplitude of the wave is also small, and we are slightly below the median multiple also. So if I look at even the 4Q numbers, the least disappointment to earnings was in large caps. So to an extent, large caps is largely a stable earnings growth at this point of time. So that is on the picture for the large caps as well. This is broadly the same illustration. What I will quickly highlight, this all we have covered in the opening remarks that I had made. So broadly, if I look at from a positioning perspective, we are overweight healthcare, industrials and utilities. ये तीन sector हम लोग को अच्छे लगते हैं. Underweight wise, we are underweight on consumer staples, materials and real estate. we have turned neutral on financials because I was running you through what all RBI has done. So we, over the past 3-4 months, we have become neutral on financials now. So coming to the large cap product itself, broadly, what I would say is that, see, this is like to put it in a cricketing lingo, it is like the Rahul Dravid of the Indian team. It is a steady, stable ship, not very flamboyant, but at the same time, it is a regular seasoned play. It has obviously the best companies in the market, in a sense, long track record and all that. And normally corporate governance is of a fairly acceptable quality because ये सब काफी cycles देख चुके होते हैं. Because they become large cap over a period of time after weathering multiple cycles. So to an extent, they are fairly more used to handling volatility in their business. So that's the basic trait of the large cap product. Also, when you look at the large cap space, one thing I wanted to allocate, see, they keep when you try to add alpha into the fund, and how do we beat the benchmark and how do we give returns? There are basically three simple ways in a large cap product. एक होती है आप कौन से सेक्टर में ओवरवेट हो, कौन से सेक्टर में अंडरवेट हो, which is basically called the allocation call. दूसरी होती है कि विद इन अ सेक्टर आप किस में ज्यादा ओवरवेट हो, अंडरवेट हो. मतलब अगर आप टेक का एग्जांपल लेंगे, एंड आई जस्ट कोट सम नेम्स हियर, वेदर यू लाइक टीसीएस मोर और इन्फोसिस मोर और एचसीएल टेक मोर, ऑल आर लार्ज कैप्स. व्हिच वन डू यू वांट टू पैक योर bullets in? Then the third thing is that as per AMFI, we need to have 80% of our fund strategy into large caps at all points of time. बाकी आपके पास बचता है तकरीबन 15 से 20%. अगर 80 एम्फी बोलता है तो मैं कभी भी कटिंग एज 80 पे नहीं रहूंगा, मैं 82 83 पे तो मिनिमम रहूंगा ही रहूंगा. So to an extent, what happens, that is a leeway of about 15 odd percent, assuming cash is 1-2% of the fund or at an average level, which I can space into certain mid caps, which I think will become large caps over time. And that can be an added source of alpha, which is to take a little bit of off benchmark bets. So these are the three basic determinants of generating alpha in any large cap product. Now, typically what happens in large cap is that we are slightly more pro allocation in large cap because it's a large liquid sector. आपकी entry exit painful नहीं होती है because it's a very liquid segments of market. आप सबको मालूम ही है, Reliance, HDFC, ICICI, ये सब नाम कितने liquid है. So it's not very unlike a small cap or a mid cap segment, which tends to be illiquid or difficulty in getting in and out. So that is one part that we try to add alpha with. Ki kaun se sectors are growing faster than the market? Where should we pack our bets and all that? Like I gave you an example that ever since we saw the change in monetary policy, we started becoming more active on financials and adding to weights there, which was usually an underweight stance for us prior to that. बिकॉज यूक्रेन के वॉर से आप देखेंगे तो बैंकिंग सेक्टर एक्चुअली चला नहीं है. So to an extent, that is where we added weights. Same way, I would say that industrials was something that we have generally been positive on because India में capex story slowly improve हो रही है. Consumer discretionary in 24 calendar year was a fairly large overweight for us, but we have turned a little bit more cautious because certain areas like consumer services, which includes retailing, which includes some part of names like the Zomatos of this world and all, have seen a little heightened competitive intensity. So we have turned a little cautious there. So those are areas that play on the allocation side. Next, we come to the selection side. So इसमें जैसे होता है कि supposing you're looking at auto sector, there are various sub-segments here. You could back the farmer segment, like, the tractor makers. You have large caps like Mahindra or mid caps like Escorts and various other things. Alternatively, you have commercial vehicle players like, Tata Motors or Ashok Leyland and stuff like that. And then you have passenger cars like Maruti, um, Hyundai, etc., or two-wheeler makers, Bajaj, Hero, etc., etc. So it is not only dependent on what you play in the sector, what sub-segment you want to back at each point of time also becomes critical. So we tend to pay a lot of attention to what sub-sectors we want to back. So that is something that we keep doing actively across that and focusing on what sub-segment to focus on. And lastly, obviously, valuation remains a key. कोई धंधा जितना भी अच्छे से अच्छा हो, if you pay a humongous price for it, it's not going to make you money. So you have to have a certain amount of value in it for you to make some money off it. So those are the various things that we look at from an investment strategy point of view. This is basically just an explanation, illustration of where our major weights are. Banks, मैंने बोला हम लोग neutral हैं because don't just read the bank's weight. It's basically a BFSI weight I'm referring to because you should add banks, you should add finance, you should add insurance, various other names that we have there. ये सब मिला के is what we have that we are neutral on. Broadly, if I look at the current positioning, we are 95% invested. Large caps is about 82%, 13% is mid caps, and 5% is the cash that we have at this point of time. So that is a broad distribution of our allocation. Now, broadly, since a lot of you may be new to our firm, what I just wanted to highlight is what we use as an appraisal statistic. We basically have a triangulation of तीन चीजें, which is business, management, and valuation. बिजनेस में हम लोग बेसिकली ये चीज देखते हैं कि whether there is a resilience to earnings, there is a moat which can help us make money over the period of our investment. So that is something that we appraise on the business side. And there is certain things improving for the better, like whether it is operating leverage आ रही है या margin improvement हो रहा है, etc., etc. Second is the management, which is basically a system of evaluating walking the talk. जो चीज management बोलती है वही कर रही है, whether they are frugal in capex, whether they actually are, something like if they say that, we want to spend 100 crores, they actually end up spending 100 crores और पता चला वो capex बढ़ बढ़ा के 500 crore हो गया है कुछ. So these are things that we look at, and our general philosophy tends to be slightly more cash flow oriented and accounting oriented. The last is obviously valuation. I already covered what we look at, that everything has a price and a value. So you have to have some sense of value because there could be businesses which are awesome, but they are so expensive that they may not make you money. So you need a certain margin of safety before getting in, which is what we look at from the valuation thing. So that broadly concludes our presentation. Happy now to open the floor for Q&A. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think very nicely you have covered all the points and बहुत ही सरलता से आपने सब कुछ बताया. So I think investors are very happy wherein they got the proper insights. And I request all the participants, if you have any question, please write it in the chat box. We'll take the question from there and we'll ask. सर फ्यू थिंग्स विच आई वुड लाइक टू अंडरस्टैंड, लाइक जैसे आपने बोला कि 15% तक का लीवे जो रहता है, वेर इन इफ विल टॉक अबाउट लार्ज कैप्स 80% हैज टू बी देयर इन द लार्ज कैप, वेर इन यू आर 80-82% देयर इन देयर.
Yeah.
So remaining 15% would be will always be there from mid cap, or will there be further deviation which you see?
Sure. So if I look at the range, आपको 3 साल का मैं range बताता हूँ. We have gone up in large cap to as high as 90% also.
Okay.
And our low point is obviously around 81 or so. हम लोग 1% का तो buffer रखते हैं. So see, there are certain mid caps who we are very positive about. And see, for example, 3 years back we bought Trent when it was a mid cap. Now it has become a large cap. So we want to identify stocks that over time can become large caps. So नॉर्मली अलाइनमेंट वैसे ही हो जाता है क्योंकि वो ओवर सब्सिक्वेंट एम्फी रिक्लासिफिकेशंस कैन बिकम लार्ज कैप. सो दैट इज व्हाट वी लुक एट.
Okay, understood. And sir, if we'll compare it, like your large cap fund strategy versus other large cap fund, because definitely the question will come to the investor's mind ki this large cap and the other large cap, any which ways the historical returns would be there, which everybody can see. But apart from that, what how will you differentiate with others?
So basically, I would say that we take very active allocation calls, that we keep shuffling sectors fairly actively because we are, see, it's a ideal size that way, because in a sense it's a fund which is about 25-2600 crores, so we can maneuver it quite actively. If you become too large and you're not able to maneuver it, then it's a different problem. But here we can easily maneuver it, so we do that. And sub-segments are बहुत ध्यान देते हैं. Like even in banking, you have the private banks, you have the state-owned banks, you have NBFCs, you have insurers, you have AMCs, capital marketplace. Uske beech mein bhi you can constantly keep doing shuffling. So we try to do these shuffles fairly actively, depending on risk-return playoffs. So that is what we keep on actively playing at. So that is one thing. Second is obviously to look for some structural themes. Sometimes, newer emerging nascent themes don't emerge in large caps. They may come from mid caps and become large caps over time. Like Classic example, Insta food delivery Joe as a business model. They would have emerged as mid caps and become large caps over a period of time. So this is something that we try to highlight कि अगर हम लोग को लगता है कि इसका TAM बहुत बड़ा हो सकता है over a period of time, we get in when they are mid caps itself and ride the full wave then.
Correct. Okay, great. So, son, one more thing, like the exposure which you have in IT companies around 8%. So, if you can just like put some light on IT sector, that'll be great.
So IT, we are not so worried about tariffs there or about various issues which is confronting the industry like AI, etc. Because we think that these are certain things that they will manage over a period of time. See, you might require to change your business model a little bit. That आपका जो पिरामिड स्ट्रक्चर है स्टाफिंग का उसकी जगह थोड़ा सा मोर मिड लेवल हायरिंग करना पड़ेगा फॉर एआई टू ट्रेन द एआई मॉडल्स एंड ऑल दैट मे नॉट नीड दैट मेनी फ्रेशर्स एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा दोस थिंग्स विल हैपन थोड़े ट्वीक्स लगेंगे मॉडल में बट वो सब हो जाएगा what we are more worried and why we are a little underweight on tech right now is a second order benefit normally क्या है इन सबको business आता है because of developing ये developed market growth normally business यूरोप से आता है या यूएस से आता है etc as you know that like I recently in the initial remarks I quoted an example कि IMF अभी global growth काट रहा है so to an extent the second order impact might actually play on the revenue growth कि अगर global growth ही थोड़ा soft हो रहा है तो you will have a situation where top line growth may not be as strong as what you originally anticipated which is where we are a little cautious on tech. We generally, I would say, if I had to put it in one sentence, it is that we are preferring local over global because Indian economy is growing, global economy is a little bit soft. So we prefer local over global.
Okay. Right. So, sir, few questions from the investors as well. Like, yes, you already touched upon Israel attack on Iraq. So, if you can just put some lights on what will be the effect directly or indirectly on our market once again.
So one part I mentioned is कि in terms of crude, थोड़ा सा sentiment dampener है वो. So you are seeing this last 2 days market also in a slight bit of correction. But I don't think it will be long lasting because there is enough spare capacity with Saudi Arabia and Qatar to fill in for what is a shortfall from Iran. बट व्हाट हैपेंस ये इंस्टेंट रिएक्शन नहीं हो पाता है जैसे ईरान का आज थोड़ा सप्लाई अगर टेपर डाउन होता है तो इट इज नॉट दैट टुमारो मॉर्निंग किसी ने नल खोला और सऊदी अरेबिया से आपको वो तेल मिल गया वो नहीं होता है वो 2-3 महीना जाता है उसको रैंप अप करने में सो टू एन एक्सटेंट दैट in the temporary phase you may see a elevated price but you over a period of time as Saudi and others ramp up you should start seeing it settling down.
Okay, so the impact will not be much in
Yeah,
long term.
yeah.
Okay. So, sir, another question is like last 3 years, large bank not made significant money for the investors, but you suggest these are at good valuation. So how, so in going forward, what do you think? What expectation the investor should keep?
So it's a good point. So one is obviously there is a valuation case which is forming there. Second, I would say has been the big stance of change of RBI. See, मैं इसीलिए आपको यूक्रेन रशिया का भी एग्जांपल कोट किया कि ever since Russia Ukraine happened, there was a global rate tightening which happened. US ने बढ़ाए rates, Europe ने बढ़ाए rates, and India also had elevated rates right up till November December. And this is the phase you will see which also was joined up with our BFSI space not working. What we see now is that you are going to see a little bit of element of the reversal starting to take place. आपका cost of financing थोड़ा गिरेगा, थोड़ा सा आपका growth के लिए भी lever मिलेगा. So hopefully that should longer term help on the NII growth. See, one part is that you may see a little bit of compression in NIM, but if the growth compensates for that, it is okay. The other part is आप consumer के हिसाब से सोचिए. You have a situation where number one, Madam FM has given a lot of tax breaks, so that is pushing up the disposable income in the hands of consumer. Add to that, your EMI will go down because of softer rates, so that is another boost to your income. Third factor which is happening is softer inflation. जैसे आप recent inflation data देखेंगे वो भी southwards जा रहा है. So that means lesser pressure for the urban consumer. So all these are actually acting as consumer buffers, which will eventually help them to leverage, buy homes, buy vehicles, all these things. So it should actually help consumer discretionary demand a little bit longer term. So that is where we think it can be played through banks as well.
Okay, great. So one more thing, sir, like if you'll see still the flow is there in the thematic category. Matlab the flow is very high there still. So as a investor, because normally हम हर समय as an investor we see कि historical return क्या है. Definitely the returns would be good. So and basis that we make our mind कि अब हमें कहाँ invest करना चाहिए. So as the flow is very much high there in thematic category, what's your suggestion would be to the investors before, like, yes, as per the profile, as per the risk appetite, it varies, but what should be the general thing which investor should keep in mind?
So, see, I would say it is a hub and spoke model in a sense. आपके जो core categories रहते हैं, like see, you if you need stability or for some part of your corpus, you will go towards large caps and so on and so forth. मतलब I'm only talking equity. मैं अभी तो fixed income का complication ला ही नहीं रहा हूँ, खाली equity में ही
जी.
बात करते हैं. Second part is that when you want a little bit of added risks and returns, then you look at mid cap, small cap, and all that. These are all part of the core category. Other than that, there could be certain thematics which work for, say, a 3-5 year time period. Like, for example, if government is making large efforts through PLI schemes, through various other schemes की हम लोग को मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को 17% से 25% तक रेज करना है या कुछ करना है ऑफ जीडीपी. See, these are thematics which you can play where you can get. See, if I were to just put it differently, अगर आपको मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को 17 से 25% बढ़ाना है, basically you are saying that that segment of economy will grow faster than the economy. क्योंकि
जी.
आपकी proportion बढ़ रही है economy. So my point is वो 25 होए ना होए, but अगर 22-23 भी पहुंच गया तो means it is going to grow faster than the economy. So the main point to highlight is that these could be certain thematics you can latch on to for smaller parts of your portfolio to get some added alpha. So that is how I would look at it. See, obviously, individual customization ke kitna dalna chahiye vagere will be more upon, as you rightly said, the risk return appetite of that investor. But I would say these are things that one can look at to customize a portfolio.
Correct. So definitely on that. So I would request our customers to get in touch with your relationship manager. Definitely, every portfolio and every customer has their own like challenges and other things like risk. Whether some customer wanted to take more risk, some customer would like to take less risk. So kindly get in touch with your relationship manager. Definitely, they have options to show you, and basis that आप वो opt कर सकते हैं. सो सर इसमें और अगर देखा जाए सो आज के टाइम में इफ somebody is having like cash in hand, so SIP would be better option or lump sum he can put. It's a general question which I'm asking, so
So
if you can just guide on that.
I can guide on that, but again, the thing is individual risk return matters because
Yes.
somebody who is very loss averse might say कि कल को मेरे मुझे नहीं मालूम इसराइल में क्या होने वाला है, ईरान में क्या होने वाला है, मुझे भी नहीं मालूम है. But all I'm trying to say is that these are risks which are there. So then, if you have a higher risk, if you think that this is genuinely surplus that I can invest for the long term, I think the markets are at levels which are amenable to investment. So there is no problem in the market. If you have a slightly lower risk appetite, you can look at products like balanced advantage or hybrid schemes or something which can lower your risk profile. Alternatively, you obviously have the option to go through fixed income if you have very low risk. So these will depend completely on that. But I don't think the markets as such are euphoric on valuations के भाई पैसा डालना बहुत खतरा है या कुछ वो तो मुझे नहीं लगता है.
Okay.
Because markets are recovering, growth, policy, everything is the catalysts are right there. So I'm not saying that markets don't look expensive to me to say that नहीं करना चाहिए.
Okay, so if somebody is having some fund, so yes, SIP is always a good option. There is no doubt. But at the same time, if you have surplus fund, yes, you can look at the options which are available there. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah. So I think, sir, we have covered most of the questions, and I believe even our customers would have got a great insight. So thank you, sir. Thank you very much, and thank you all the participants for joining us on this webinar. And have a great day. Yes, once again, I would like to tell you, like, kindly go through our InvestRight app. You have all the options there on your fingertip. So try, explore that. You'll get all the options to invest in the market. And thank you once again, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Diwakar ji, and thank you so much to all of you for patient listening. Thank you so much.